The Andromeda Medical Institute prided itself on three things: cutting-edge xenobiological research, a mortality rate that hadn't broken double digits in 73 cycles, and scanners so precise they could detect a failing organ 3 days before the organ knew it was failing. Which made the current situation in Emergency Bay 7 absolutely unacceptable. "Run it again," Dr. Veshikara said, her primary manipulator twitching in a way that suggested she was about 2 minutes from molting out of sheer stress. The creche didn't molt from stress. Their exoskeletons were far too expensive to replace on emotional whims. But there was a first time for everything, and today seemed determined to provide it. The medical scanner, a sleek crystalline apparatus worth more than a small moon, hummed with what could only be described as mechanical confusion. Numbers flickered across its display. Then flickered again. Then gave up entirely and displayed a small icon that roughly translated to, "You're kidding, right?" "Same readings, doctor," the nurse reported. Kilantha was a verdant, all chlorophyll-based serenity and photosynthetic patience. But even her leaves were starting to brown at the edges. Blood pressure, 60/40. Oxygen saturation, 82%. Core temperature, 36.5 degrees standard. Those numbers describe a corpse. "Yes, doctor." "A corpse that's been dead for approximately 17 minutes. "Yes, doctor." "Then explain." Veshkara gestured with all 4 arms at the creature sitting on the examination platform. "Why it's filling out admission paperwork." The human, because of course it was a human, the universe's latest practical joke on established biology, looked up from her datapad. "I prefer she, actually, and I'm almost done. Just need to confirm my emergency contact information." She. Right. The humans had gender, which was already weird, but they also had the audacity to care about it while literally defying thermodynamic death. Veshkara's training had covered over 400 species, their biological quirks, their cultural sensitivities, their unique approaches to mortality. None of that training had prepared her for this. "You were in a shuttle crash," Veshkara said slowly, the way one might explain orbital mechanics to a particularly dim asteroid. "The impact registered at 47 Gs. Your restraint harness failed. You struck 3 bulkheads and the forward console." "Yeah, that tracking," the human said, not looking up. "Pretty standard shuttle malfunction. The pilot said something about a servo coupling, but honestly, I wasn't paying attention. I was studying for my practical exam." "Your practical exam?" "For medical certification. I'm a 3rd cycle cadet. Kind of important I pass, you know? I've already rescheduled twice." Kilantha made a sound like wind through dying grass. "You're worried about an exam. Your internal organs should be soup. My organs are fine." The human, finally, looked up, and Veshikara noticed her eyes. Bilateral, forward-facing, absurdly inefficient design, were slightly different colors. Another biological inconsistency to add to the growing list. "A little bruised, maybe." "Do you have anything for headaches? The crash gave me a nasty one." "A headache?" Veshikara repeated. "Yeah, right here." The human touched her forehead, which was leaking red fluid from a gash that should have exposed skull. She'd apparently sealed it with medical tape. Medical tape, the kind used for securing bandages, not holding heads together. "Bring me 3 more scanners," Veshkara ordered. "Different manufacturers, different calibration standards. I want quantum-level diagnostics and a full cellular breakdown. Doctor, the scanners aren't—" "Now, Kilantha." 17 minutes later, 4 of the galaxy's most sophisticated medical devices had achieved perfect consensus. The human sitting before them was catastrophically, impossibly, irreversibly dying. She was also asking about the cafeteria hours. "Okay, let me try a different approach," Veshikara said. pulling up a holographic display of what the scanners insisted were the human's vital statistics. This pressure reading, 60/40. Do you understand what that means? Low blood pressure? The human squinted at the display. Yeah, I run a bit low. Always have. Makes me dizzy if I stand up too fast. It makes you dizzy, not dead. Dizzy. Well, yeah. Dead would be inconvenient. Calantha's leaves were now distinctly beige. How are you conscious? How are you speaking? How are your cells receiving oxygen? The human shrugged, which caused 2 of the scanners to emit warning chimes about dangerous movement with suspected spinal damage. I mean, they just do. I don't think about it. Do you think about photosynthesis? That's completely different. Is it, though? You convert light to energy. I convert oxygen to energy. Yours seems weirdly dependent on standing in sunny spots, if we're being honest. Veshkara felt something crack in her carapace. Stress molt. Definitely incoming. Your temperature, she pressed on, because retreat was not an option, and surrender was for species that hadn't spent 12 cycles in medical training. 36.5 degrees. The ambient temperature in this bay is 21 degrees. You should be hypothermic. You should be experiencing organ failure. You should be... Cold? I am a little cold. That's why I asked about the cafeteria. Hot tea would be great. Hot tea? Or coffee. I'm not picky. A third doctor entered the bay, summoned by what had apparently become a facility-wide crisis. Dr. Then was a crystallid, all geometric precision and mathematical certainty, whose species had solved interstellar travel by treating physics as a suggestion rather than a law. If anyone could make sense of impossible biology, it was Then. They examined the scanner data for exactly 4 seconds. Fascinating, Then said, their facets refracting the overhead lights into unreadable patterns. She's operating at approximately 40% efficiency compared to galactic biological standards. Thank you, Veshkara said. Finally, someone who... And she's still functional. Remarkable. It's like watching a ship run on a single engine and half a fuel cell. Inefficient, wasteful, absolutely shouldn't work, but here we are. The human raised her hand. Question. Are you saying everyone else's biology is 60% better than mine? Not better, Then corrected. More efficient. Your cellular respiration is crude, your oxygen delivery system is laughably primitive, and your electrical neural impulses are... They paused, recalculated. Actually, your neural activity is concerning for entirely different reasons. You're firing synapses at a rate that should cause continuous seizures. Huh. Is that why I'm good at multitasking? That's not how... Then's crystalline structure actually flickered. You're giving me a computational headache. Welcome to my world, Veshkara muttered. The human hopped off the examination platform, ignoring 3 separate scanner alerts about dangerous movement with suspected fractures. She was short compared to most galactic species, built with a stockiness that suggested her planet had serious gravity issues, and she moved with the kind of casual disregard for injury that usually required heavy sedation. Look, she said, I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine. This is normal for humans. We're built different. You're built wrong, Veshkara said. Wrong implies there's a right way. Maybe everyone else is just fragile. The silence that followed was the kind usually reserved for funerals or tenure review boards. Calantha found her voice first. You think we're fragile? I mean, kind of? You need everything perfect. Perfect temperature, perfect pressure, perfect oxygen levels. One little shuttle crash and you're all freaking out. Meanwhile, I'm just wondering if I can still make my exam slot at 1400 hours. Your exam slot. Yeah, I've been studying the Galactic Physiology Index for 3 months. I'm not missing it because of a headache and some bruises. Veshkara looked at Then. Then looked at Kilantha. Kilantha looked at the scanners, which were still insisting the human should be dead. "We need to call a faculty meeting," Veshkara said quietly. "Agreed," Then replied. The human checked her datapad. "Can it wait until after 1400? "I really can't miss this exam." Professor Nalvex arrived in a cloud of pheromones that translated roughly to, "This better be worth interrupting my thesis defense." The hive mind occupied 17 bodies simultaneously, each one a different aspect of their collective consciousness. And right now, 12 of those aspects were deeply annoyed. "Show me the specimen," Nalvex demanded, their primary body settling into an observation stance, while the others fanned out to examine equipment, cross-reference databases, and organize what appeared to be a protest about academic interruptions. "She's not a specimen," Dr. Veshkara said tiredly. "She's a medical cadet." Third cycle, currently locked in conference room B because she tried to leave for her exam. "You can find a student?" She walked past 3 separate trauma alerts, offered to help with a surgery, and asked if anyone needed their appendix removed for practice. Veshkara's carapace was definitely cracking now. "What's an appendix?" Nalvex's bodies went still, a rare moment of unified focus. "Let me see the biological workup." The data transfer took 6 seconds. Nalvex's processing took 3. Their response took considerably longer because half their bodies had to restart after what could only be described as a cognitive crash. "This is a joke," Nalvex said finally. "Someone's testing our crisis protocols." 4 independent scanners, Then reported from their corner, where they'd been calculating probability matrices. "Quantum-level verification, cellular sampling, genetic sequencing. Everything confirms. This is what humans consider baseline functionality." Baseline? Baseline! One of Nalvex's bodies actually stamped a foot, which was shocking because hive minds didn't do emotional outbursts. They had 17 bodies to distribute feelings across. Her mitochondria are running on what I can only describe as spite and chemical desperation. Look at this ATP synthesis rate. It's barely above bacterial efficiency. And yet she's conscious, verbal, and frankly condescending about our concern, Veshkara added. A new voice cut through the growing chaos, crystalline and sharp enough to etch glass. "Perhaps because your concern is misplaced." Dr. Zental materialized into the discussion. Literally, because weavers didn't walk so much as exist in one place, and then choose to exist in another. They were composed entirely of mathematical concepts given physical form, which made them excellent at theoretical biology and absolutely terrible at parties. "The human isn't defying biology," Zental continued, geometric patterns shifting across their translucent form. "She's demonstrating an alternative solution set to the problem of existence." "That's just fancy talk for she shouldn't work," Nalvex shot back. "No. It's recognition that our definition of work is provincially narrow." Zental produced a holographic display, equations that hurt to look at directly. "I've modeled her cellular processes. Humans don't optimize for efficiency. They optimize for resilience. Every system has redundancy, multiple failure points, adaptive responses to trauma that would make emergency protocols look like suggestions." "Give me an example," Veshkara said. "Her immune system." Zental expanded a section of the display. "It attacks her own body approximately 40,000 times per day. Random checks, practice runs, keeps the whole defense network battle-ready by constantly fighting imaginary threats." "That's insane. That's preparation. When a real threat appears, her immune system doesn't need warm-up time. It's already in combat mode." Zental shifted through probability clouds. Now extrapolate that philosophy across every biological system. Her brain runs hot because it's constantly processing threats that don't exist. Her heart pumps inefficiently because it's maintaining capacity for emergencies. Her blood pressure stays low because high pressure is a liability in trauma situations. Kilantha interrupted, her leaves brightening with sudden understanding. If she gets cut, she bleeds slower, survives longer. Precisely. Humans aren't poorly designed. They're designed for catastrophe. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't confusion. It was the sound of world views restructuring themselves at the fundamental level. Nalvex broke first. What kind of planet produces organisms designed for catastrophe? I pulled the stellar data while you were arguing, Then said, projecting Earth's profile. Let's see. Active tectonic plates causing regular earthquakes, volcanic activity across 17% of land masses, weather systems capable of generating wind speeds that exceed most species' terminal velocity tolerances. And, oh, this is interesting, the dominant predators during their evolutionary period had bite forces capable of crushing vehicle hulls. That's not a planet, Veshikara whispered. That's a weapons testing facility. It gets better, Then continued, with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found a truly spectacular mathematical anomaly. Seasonal temperature variations of 60 degrees, atmospheric oxygen levels high enough to support combustion, and they have plants that evolved chemical defenses so aggressive that humans consume them recreationally for the burning sensation. You're making this up. I'm reading directly from the Planetary Survey. Earth passed galactic habitation minimums by the narrowest margin in Survey Corps history. The evaluation team recommended quarantine, but someone in colonial administration marked it suitable for resilient species. Then's facets gleamed with something like amusement. They meant bacteria. Humans showed up anyway. One of Nalvex's bodies approached the conference room window, peering at the human inside. She was reviewing notes on her datapad, occasionally touching the gash on her forehead with the casual concern most people reserved for minor itches. What are her injury recovery projections? Nalvex asked. That's the other problem, Veshikara said. We can't calculate them. Her healing processes don't follow standard cellular regeneration models. She's already showing tissue reconstruction at the wound site, but it's chaotic, disorganized. Her body's just throwing cells at the problem and hoping something works. And it does work? Apparently. Her medical history shows broken bones, lacerations, concussions, and something called food poisoning that she describes as kind of unpleasant. Our analysis suggests it should have been fatal. Zental was running new calculations, their form blurring with processing speed. I need to test a hypothesis. Let me speak with her. Before anyone could object, Zental was inside the conference room, mathematical certainty meeting biological absurdity face to face. You're aware your species shouldn't exist? Zental asked without preamble. The human looked up. That's a bit rude. It's statistical fact. I've modeled your homeworld's environmental conditions against known biological development patterns. The probability of complex life emerging from Earth's chaos approaches 0.003%. And yet here I am. The human smiled, which was apparently something humans did with their mouths when they found things amusing. Disturbing. Maybe your models are incomplete. My models account for 17 million years of evolutionary data across 4,000 worlds. But not Earth. Earth is an outlier, a statistical impossibility that happened anyway. Or maybe, the human said, setting down her datapad. Earth is normal, and everywhere else is the outlier. You all evolved in safe environments, stable temperatures, predictable disasters. We didn't. We had to become resilient because nothing else would let us survive. She paused. Makes you wonder who's really the fragile ones. Zental flickered, the mathematical equivalent of a double take. Through the window, Veshkara watched the exchange with growing horror. She's not wrong. Of course she's wrong, Nalvex protested, but their voices lacked conviction. We're the galactic standard, billions of species all following the same basic biological principles. The same basic principles that fail catastrophically under stress, Kilantha said softly, while humans just call it Tuesday. Then's calculations were accelerating, creating light patterns that bordered on hypnotic. New hypothesis. What if the Institute has encountered humans before? What if we categorized them as anomalies rather than recognizing a pattern? Check the archives, Veshkara ordered. Already am, Then replied. And oh, this is going to be a problem. The archives occupied 17 sub-levels beneath the Institute, which was either impressive planning or architectural overcompensation. Dr. Silmoth had worked there for 42 cycles and prided herself on knowing every classified case file, every buried medical mystery, every incident the faculty preferred to forget. She'd never seen the search term human generate 374 hits. That can't be right, she muttered, her thermal sensors flickering with concentration. Silmoth was a flamekin, all superheated plasma and controlled fusion, which made her excellent at data preservation. Nothing decayed in her presence, it just occasionally burst into flames. The species only achieved space travel 30 cycles ago. She pulled the first file, then the second. By the fifth, she'd activated emergency cooling systems and sent a priority summons to the Faculty Emergency Committee. The conference room filled within minutes, which said something about how thoroughly the human cadet had destabilized their collective understanding of medicine. Tell me you found something, Veshkara said. Oh, I found something. Silmoth projected the first case file into the holographic display. Cycle 2247, mining accident on Kepler Station, decompression event, 6 casualties, all species with established vacuum exposure tolerances. Fatality rate, 100%, except, she highlighted a footnote, 1 survivor, human male, unconscious for 40 seconds, woke up asking about his shift schedule. Vacuum exposure for 40 seconds? Nalvex's bodies clustered together in collective disbelief. Lung collapse, embolism, cellular rupture from rapid decompression. All documented in his medical report, listed as unusual recovery pattern, filed under anomalous incidents and forgotten. Silmoth pulled another file. Cycle 2251, combat injury during the Tertian conflict, projectile weapon, actual chemical propellant slugs, barbaric technology, penetrated human female's thoracic cavity, punctured lung, severed major arterial pathway. Medics pronounced her deceased at the scene. But she walked into the field hospital 3 hours later, carrying her wounded commander. The lung had partially reinflated, the artery had clotted. She demanded ammunition resupply and returned to combat. Silmoth's temperature spiked, scorching the projection slightly. The attending physician filed it as clerical error regarding death certification, rather than admit he'd watched biology rewrite itself. Then was already cross-referencing. I'm finding patterns. 14 cases of impossible survival in shuttle accidents, 23 instances of rapid recovery from fatal wounds, 47 humans treated for environmental exposure that should have caused immediate death, extreme heat, radiation, chemical contamination, who responded with what physicians described as mild discomfort. There's more, Silmoth said, her form dimming with what might have been concern. Cycle 2253. Outbreak of Vexian fever on the medical ship Compassion. Mortality rate among crew, 94% across 17 species. Do you know what happened to the human nurses? The room waited. They got sick for 3 days, complained about something called body aches, and returned to work. Still contagious, still shedding virus. Just didn't care. Silmoth pulled up the medical notes. The ship's doctor wrote, "Human immune response appears to operate on principles of mutually assured destruction. Rather than eliminate pathogens, subjects seem to establish hostile coexistence, maintaining infection while preventing symptoms through sheer biological stubbornness." "That's not medicine," Veshkara said faintly. "That's warfare. It's adaptation." Zental was recalculating so rapidly their form had become almost abstract. Every case demonstrates the same principle. Humans don't have optimal biology. They have survivable biology. They can exist in states that we classify as death because their threshold for death is catastrophically higher. Kilantha's leaves had progressed beyond beige into a concerning shade of gray. "What about the children? Surely their young are more vulnerable?" Silmoth pulled a pediatric file, hesitated, pulled 3 more. Cycle 2249. Human child, age 7 standard years. Fell from observation deck. 18-meter drop onto composite deck plating. Fractured arm, minor concussion. Treated and released. Physician's notes describe child as irritated about missing recess, which apparently means recreational activity time. She cycled through reports. Human infant survived airlock malfunction. Human toddler ingested cleaning solution, toxicity level fatal to adults of most species, required minimal intervention. Human adolescent contracted 3 separate diseases simultaneously, including one we thought was extinct, and the infections apparently fought each other while the child played something called video games. "Their children are indestructible?" Nalvex's voices harmonized in collective horror. "Not indestructible, just built with the assumption that childhood involves regular attempts at accidental suicide." Silmoth projected mortality statistics. Human juvenile survival rates in hazardous environments exceed adult rates for 60% of galactic species. They treat their development period as training for a hostile universe. "Because they come from a hostile universe," Then said. "It's not preparation. It's their baseline reality." Veshkara was scrolling through files now, her movements mechanical with shock. "These reports span 3 decades, hundreds of incidents. Why didn't anyone notice the pattern?" "Because we did what we always do with data that doesn't fit our models," Silmoth said quietly. "We called it anomalous. We filed it away. We convinced ourselves each incident was unique rather than admit our understanding of biology was incomplete. The conference room's environmental systems struggled to maintain neutral atmosphere as thermal, photosynthetic, and chemical-based metabolisms all processed the same horrifying conclusion. "Let me understand this," Veshkara said slowly. "Humans evolved on a planet so hostile that their normal operating parameters would kill most galactic citizens. They survived not by becoming efficient, but by becoming resilient. And we've been treating this resilience as medical mystery instead of recognizing it as their fundamental nature." "That's the kind interpretation," Zental said. "The accurate interpretation is worse." "How could it possibly be worse?" "Because Earth isn't finished with them." Zental displayed planetary data, geological timelines, evolutionary projections. Earth is still active, still hostile, still generating environmental pressures that would terraform most species out of existence. Humans haven't adapted to their planet. They're continuously adapting. Every generation faces new selection pressures. They're not a finished evolutionary product. They're a work in progress on a world that refuses to let them rest. The implications settled over the room like radiation, invisible, pervasive, and fundamentally reality-altering. One of Nalvex's bodies approached the window, where the human cadet remained visible, still studying, still ignoring her injuries, with the practiced ease of someone for whom pain was just another Tuesday. "What happens when we certify her?" Nalvex asked. "When we send her out to practice medicine on species whose biology is, by her standards, laughably fragile?" "We could refuse certification," Veshkara suggested without conviction. "On what grounds?" "She understands galactic physiology better than most of our graduates. Her practical exam scores are exemplary. She's just operating from a framework where death is negotiable rather than absolute," Then finished. Silmuth dimmed further. "There's one more file you should see. Flagged for faculty review but never actually reviewed. Cycle 2256. Human Military Assessment." She projected it. The room read in silence. Finally, Kilantha spoke, her voice barely rustling. "This says the human in our conference room, our cadet, washed out of Earth's combat training program." "Correct, because she wasn't tough enough. The terminology was insufficient stress tolerance for hostile environment operations. She survived a 47G crash and walked away with a headache," Veshkara said. "What do they consider sufficient?" Silmuth pulled up Earth military standards. The room's environmental systems began failing as various species experienced simultaneous existential crises. Training requirements included surviving without water for 72 hours, operating in temperature extremes ranging from sub-freezing to above boiling, maintaining function after blood loss that would empty most species' entire circulatory systems, and something called Hell Week that appeared to be systematic torture rebranded as education. This is their minimum standard, Then calculated, for entry-level positions. "What are their maximums?" Nalvex asked. Nobody answered. Nobody wanted to know. Through the window, the human cadet stretched, a casual movement that caused her bruised muscles to protest and her cracked ribs to shift. She winced slightly, then returned to her studies with the dedication of someone who'd learned long ago that discomfort was just background noise. "We need to update the Galactic medical database," Veshkara said finally. "Create new classification standards. Reevaluate our understanding of viable biology." "We need to do more than that," Silmuth replied. "We need to ask ourselves, if this is what humanity considers fragile, what else is coming from Earth that we've completely failed to prepare for?" The question hung in the recycled air, unanswered and unanswerable, while somewhere in the archives, 374 case files waited to reveal just how thoroughly the galaxy had misunderstood the species from the nightmare world. And in Conference Room B, the human checked her chronometer and frowned. Her exam started in 30 minutes, and nobody had brought her that tea yet. Dean Vorakis had presided over the Andromeda Medical Institute for 19 cycles without a single institutional crisis that couldn't be solved through careful bureaucracy and strategic committee formation. They were a time warden, a species that experienced causality non-linearly and could literally see problems before they occurred. They had not seen this coming. "Let me ensure I understand the dilemma," Vorakis said, their temporal field rippling with what might have been a headache across 3 different time streams. "We cannot certify this cadet because she fails to meet the fundamental biological prerequisites we've established for sapient life." "Correct," Veshkara confirmed. "However, we also cannot deny certification to someone who has demonstrated comprehensive understanding of xenomedicine, scored in the 98th percentile on all theoretical examinations, and possesses practical experience that makes our own trauma protocols look." How did Dr. Silmoth phrase it? Adorably optimistic. "Also correct. And the reason she possesses this experience is that her species treats casual existence as continuous emergency medicine." "You're grasping the problem beautifully, Dean." Vorakis cycled through several potential timelines, watching each one collapse into administrative nightmare. In one future, they denied certification and faced a discrimination lawsuit from Earth's increasingly aggressive diplomatic corps. In another, they certified her and watched her accidentally kill patients through the radical assumption that they could survive treatments designed for human physiology. In a third timeline, they did nothing, and she simply walked out, started practicing medicine anyway, and the institute became galactically irrelevant. Has anyone actually asked the human what she wants? Vorakis inquired. The assembled faculty exchanged glances. Apparently not. Conference Room B had become something of a pilgrimage site. Various professors had found excuses to walk past, observe the human through the transperistyle, and recalibrate their understanding of possible biology. The cadet had ignored them all with the focused intensity of someone who'd learned that the universe's opinions were secondary to passing exams. Vorakis entered alone. The human looked up. Finally. Is this about my certification? Or am I being quarantined for biological terrorism? The former. Possibly both. We're still debating. Vorakis settled into a chair, their temporal field stabilizing. I've reviewed your case, your test scores, your planetary origin data, the truly alarming military standards you failed to meet. Yeah, I'm not really soldier material. The human rubbed her temples, the headache apparently persisting despite medication that should have rendered her unconscious. Turns out I'm too squeamish about violence, prefer healing to hurting. How noble. Also how problematic. Vorakis pulled up the certification requirements. Our medical standards assume practitioners possess biology compatible with their patients. You don't. Your existence violates approximately 60% of our viability metrics. So I've heard. Apparently I should be dead. Multiple times over, according to 4 independent analyses. The human leaned back, and Vorakis noticed the casual way she moved. No fear of aggravating injuries, no consciousness of the trauma her body had recently endured. She simply existed in a state of constant low-level damage, and accepted it as normal. Here's my perspective, the human said. You all have medicine that works brilliantly for biology that functions correctly. But what happens when biology doesn't cooperate? When patients present with impossible symptoms, survive unsurvivable injuries, or just refuse to follow the rules you've established? We classify them as anomalies. Exactly. And then what? You've got no treatment protocols for the impossible, no frameworks for the absurd. You've optimized for perfection, but the universe doesn't do perfection. She gestured at her own body. It does me. Messy, inefficient, stubborn me. Vorakis experienced several temporal echoes simultaneously. Possible futures where this conversation went very differently. You're suggesting we need specialists in biological dysfunction. I'm suggesting you need doctors who understand that sometimes the textbook is wrong, the scanners are confused, and the patient is alive anyway. Call it dysfunction if you want. I call it reality. Reality from an Earth perspective. Is there another kind that matters? The human smiled again, and Vorakis understood why so many faculty found the expression unsettling. It wasn't aggressive or threatening. It was confident in a way that suggested she'd already won arguments the rest of them hadn't realized were happening. Look, you can deny my certification. I'll go practice somewhere else. Earth's colonies are always hiring, and we're expanding faster than your models predicted, which seems to be our specialty. Or you adapt. Create new standards. Recognize that maybe your definition of viable biology is provincially narrow, like Dr. Zental said. I can help with that. I've spent my entire life figuring out how to keep bodies running when they shouldn't. Seems like useful expertise. Vorakis watched. Probability matrices collapse and reform. The human wasn't wrong. Irritatingly, catastrophically not wrong. You're blackmailing us with competence. I'm offering a solution to a problem you didn't know you had until I crashed a shuttle into your emergency bay. You're enjoying this? Little bit, yeah. The emergency faculty meeting reconvened with an audience now, because word had spread through the institute that something unprecedented was happening. Students packed the observation galleries. Junior professors abandoned their labs. Even the cafeteria staff had found excuses to loiter near the conference hall. Dean Vorakis addressed the assembly with the gravity of someone reshaping institutional reality. After extensive deliberation, the faculty has reached a decision regarding Cadet. Vorakis paused, realizing they'd spent hours debating her biology without learning her actual name. Chen, the human supplied helpfully. Mei Chen. Figured you'd get around to asking eventually. Cadet Chen presents us with an unprecedented challenge. Her biology fails to meet our established standards for living organisms. However, these standards were created without consideration for species originating from high-stress evolutionary environments. This oversight is ours, not hers. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Veshkara's carapace had finally stopped cracking. She'd apparently accepted that her worldview was permanently damaged and made peace with it. Therefore, Vorakis continued, we are creating a new medical classification, high-tolerance species. These are organisms whose baseline physiological parameters fall outside established norms, but who maintain consciousness, sapience, and function despite apparent catastrophic system failures. You're calling us broken but functional, Chen asked. We're calling you adequately adapted to conditions we pray never to encounter. Vorakis projected the new certification framework. This classification will require specialized training in what we're tentatively calling crisis biology, the study of organisms that thrive in circumstances that should preclude thriving. Zental's geometric form brightened with approval. Elegant solution. Admit our standards were incomplete rather than insist reality conform to our expectations. Cadet Chen, Vorakis said formally, pending successful completion of your practical examination, you will become the Institute's first certified crisis biology specialist. Your scope of practice will include treatment of high-tolerance species and consultation on cases involving apparently impossible survival. Chen stood, winced slightly, the ribs again, ignored it with practiced ease. I accept. Can I take my exam now? It's 2 hours past my scheduled slot, and I've been reviewing the same material for 6 months. The examination committee is prepared, Veshkara confirmed, with the resignation of someone who'd already accepted that normal protocols were dead. Standard practical assessment, diagnosis and treatment planning for 15 xenobiological scenarios. Great. Let's do this. The practical exam took 90 minutes. Chen scored perfectly on 14 scenarios. The 15th involved a hypothetical patient with symptoms that matched no known disease profile, a stress test designed to evaluate diagnostic reasoning under uncertainty. Chen stared at the data for 30 seconds, then wrote, Patient is human. Symptoms are baseline normal. Discharge with recommendation for mild painkiller and adequate hydration. The examining committee reviewed her answer, cross-referenced the symptom profile with the newly accessible human medical database, discovered she was absolutely correct. They'd accidentally created a stress test from what humans considered a minor inconvenience. She passed. 3 days later, Cadet Chen, now Dr. Chen, crisis biology specialist, reported for her first shift in the Institute's trauma center. The attending physician briefed her on current cases with the nervous energy of someone handling unstable antimatter. Bed 7, thermal shock from environmental malfunction. Bed 12, toxic exposure, prognosis uncertain. Bed 18, multiple fractures from industrial accident, patient conscious but deteriorating. I'll take 18, Chen said. Are you certain? The patient is critical. We're discussing compassionate termination. You're discussing giving up. I'm discussing treatment. Chen grabbed a medical scanner and headed for bed 18, leaving the attending to sputter about protocols and procedure. The patient was a young verdant, their leaves blackened and wilting from trauma that had shattered their crystalline skeletal structure. Conventional wisdom said they were dead already, just too stubborn to notice. Chen ran the scanner, checked vitals, compared them to baseline verdant physiology. "Okay," she said calmly. "You've got 3 fractures, significant fluid loss, and your photosynthetic processes are shutting down. By galactic standards, you're unsavable." The patient's primary leaf trembled. "Then why are you here?" "Because galactic standards are written by species that evolved in safe neighborhoods. I'm from Earth. We don't do safe." Chen began adjusting treatment protocols, modifying dosages, recalibrating support systems based on principles that no textbook covered. "Your body is trying to survive. It's just doing it badly because it's never had to try this hard before. So we're going to help." "How?" "By treating you like you're human. Assume nothing is actually fatal until proven otherwise. Maintain function through catastrophic damage. Support your body's chaos instead of trying to impose order." Chen smiled. That unsettling expression of confidence that suggested she'd already seen this patient walking out healthy. "Trust me, where I come from, this is just a really bad Tuesday." 4 hours later, the verdant's vitals stabilized. 8 hours later, photosynthesis resumed. 12 hours later, they were conscious, complaining about the lighting, and asking about discharge timelines. The attending physician stared at the readings in disbelief. "How did you—" "I didn't fix them according to the textbook. I fixed them according to what actually works." Chen checked her chronometer. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have 6 more impossible cases to review. Apparently, the trauma center's been sitting on them for weeks, afraid to admit they had no idea what to do." She walked away, leaving the attending to contemplate the horrifying possibility that Earth hadn't sent them a student. They'd sent them a teacher. Somewhere in the Institute's administrative offices, Dean Vorakis updated the Galactic medical database with a new entry. Species: human, Earth. Classification: high tolerance, crisis-adapted hazard. Assessment: unclear, possibly apocalyptic notes. Standard biological metrics do not apply. Recommend consultation with crisis biology specialists for all cases involving Terran physiology. Warning: human medical personnel may demonstrate treatment approaches that appear reckless but prove effective. Do not interfere unless actively harmful. They know something we don't. And in the trauma center, Dr. Mei Chen discovered that her next patient had survived a decompression event that should have been instantly fatal, woke from a medically induced coma demanding coffee, and responded to the shocked medical team with the most human phrase imaginable. "Yeah, I'm fine." "Why does everyone keep freaking out?" She laughed, because of course the patient was human too, and got to work saving another life that the galaxy had already given up on. Just another Tuesday. Just another impossible thing that Earth had decided was routine. Just another reminder that sometimes the nightmare world produces exactly what the universe needs, even if it takes everyone else a while to stop screaming and start listening.